We're at the time of the summer solstice, and there's a lot of things in the news items in the newspaper, and every year there seems to be a lot going on with regard to the solstice, and it's all to do with the sun in the sky, and the aspect of the solstice being the longest day. And I want to first begin with Genesis 1:14-19, because that tells us really what God says about the sun. And I know we know it at Father's house, but I'll ask you to listen, and as a way of reminding ourselves the importance of the sun in the sky and the moon and the lights in the sky. It's Genesis 1:14-19, and it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and to let them be for signs and for seasons and for dates and years." And in some translations it says, "for appointed times, for the Moedim," which means the appointed feasts of the Lord. And verse 15 says, "And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, which is the sun, obviously, and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. And it says then, 17, is that God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning on the fourth day. So they are for two things. They are for the appointed feasts, the Moedim, which is Sabbath through to Sukkot, the tabernacles, and it's also to separate light from darkness. And that's the point, really, that when we start to look at the spiritual realm, we see light and darkness. And we see that they are two separate things, and actually God is the light that pierces the darkness. But let's have a look at what's happening today in the summer solstice in the UK. Well, we see that Stonehenge is the central place for people who were wanting not only to look at the way that Stonehenge was made to pinpoint the timing of the sun, but it was also made, or today it is used as a place of worship. And Stonehenge was built about 2,500 years before Christ, BC. And it's not the oldest monument. Newgrange in Ireland is a prehistoric monument, or a prehistoric tomb actually, and it's in Ireland, and it was built about 3,200 BC. So it's an older building than Stonehenge, and it's actually the first building that had a roof on it in this way. And then we see that the Egyptian pyramids were built about the same time as Stonehenge, and continued to be built up until about 664 BC. These things are all built by man and have a connection to the sun. Now, today is the summer solstice, the longest day, and a day which was recognised by the builders of Stonehenge and Newgrange and the pyramids, and they built them with the sun in mind. The day of the solstice is considered by most to be the beginning of summer. The word solstice means to stop and to stand still. It's the only day of the year when the Arctic experiences total sun for the complete 24 hours. Both these monuments that we've mentioned, Stonehenge and Newgrange and the pyramids, show us and give us an understanding that man has always understood the significance of the sun and the moon, and has seen them as having deeply spiritual significance. And of course that's true, because God set them in place in the sky to show us the Sabbath and the appointed times that would point forward to the Messiah. and he would then fulfill them. So yes, they have a massively spiritual importance, and that's why man is drawn to them, because man is seeking a spiritual experience. However, man has gone on, and instead of recognizing the true God, he has created other gods to whom man has given honor. So the sun god Mithras, and the god Cananis in the winter solstice. And man has not seen the God of Israel as the true God, but has seen other gods and created other gods to worship in connection with the sun. So what is interesting about these buildings is that their purpose is to have been connected to the sun, but also afterlife. And in the case of the pyramids and Newgrange, they were built as huge tombs where the dead were buried. And they were mortuaries, really, large tombs where the dead were buried in the hope of an afterlife. And of course, you can only have hope in the afterlife through Yeshua, but this is what they believed when they built them. And let's remember, this is before Yeshua. God placed the sun and the moon in the sky to point to his appointed feasts, though. And they speak of life and freedom, not death. They're separate to the idea of a tomb as a place of worship. God is a God who is a God of life. And that's why God says in Ezekiel, he says, don't bury your kings in my place of worship, because God is a God of life. He doesn't want references to death at the place of worship, which is what the pyramids and Newgrange signify. And the Sabbath, which is connected directly to God's appointed feasts. The Moedim, as we see in Genesis 1:14, speaks of rest, which you can only attain if you're free to do so and not connected to death. The sun, however, has historically signified the gods of the sun, and in particular Sol Invictus. In 321 AD, Emperor Constantine honoured the sun, Sol Invictus, the god Sol Invictus, by making a decree on the 7th of March 321 that everyone in the Roman Empire should rest on a Sunday in honour of Sol Invictus, the sun god, and Christendom. The sun god. And Christendom has followed that decree of Constantine's ever since. So we can see why Christendom expanded the honouring of the sun during the Easter celebration, when many Christians get up early on Easter Sunday morning to see the rising of the sun. That practice dates back to sun worship, which goes back as far as things like Stonehenge and Newgrange and the pyramids. But actually, what they should be celebrating at Easter is the celebration of first fruits, which is the rising of the Son of God, the resurrection. The winter solstice becomes significant on the 21st of December because that is also connected to the sun, because it's the day in which the sun in the sky is there for the shortest time of the year. And paganism have taken that to worship the god of Mithras, the sun god, and they actually give Mithras his birthday as the 25th of December. That's why Christendom moved again in line with the sun worship to celebrate the birth of the Messiah at the time of the Mithras celebration, his birth, not the birth of the Son of God, but actually birth of the sun in the sky. So when we hear of the pagans and witches and Wiccans celebrating the summer solstice, this celebration that we see today is, as one Wicca has told me, that Christendom celebrations are connected so closely to the calendar of the Wiccan that many witches and Wiccans don't see there's much difference in this calendar and the Christian calendar. And I have to agree. I remember a Wiccan coming to see me and actually challenging me over what we do as Christians and because she'd heard that I was critical of Wiccan practice, and she said, "But you're doing the same." And I actually was able to say to her, "No, I don't. We actually keep the appointed feasts that God created before He put the stars in the sky and the sun in the sky." Back in Genesis 1:14. So, and she understood what we were doing, and actually was very keen to know exactly why we were doing the things that we were doing, because she saw Christendom as having no integrity, but the things that we do here at Father's house, she saw as having integrity. Now, when I look at cathedrals and many traditional churches, they are often built on a similar principle to Stonehenge, Newgrange, and the pyramids, as they are places of the burial of the dead. If you look at Westminster Abbey, there's over 3,400 bodies buried at Westminster Abbey. And the calendars of the church, the abbeys and the churches, are identical to those and replicate those of sun worshippers going back to when Stonehenge was built. So I'm glad that we at Father's House celebrate God's appointed feasts, which are tied in with the timing of the lights in the sky, because these celebrations that we have all point to everlasting life through the Son of God, not the sun in the sky. The sun in the sky only points to the Son of God. So when the final one of the appointed feasts, which is Sukkot, Tabernacles, is fulfilled by the God of life, Yeshua, then all of Christendom and all the worshippers, those at Stonehenge, those today who look to the sun, who actually worship the sun in some ways, will then understand the significance of the sun in the sky, which points to the Son of our amazing God. Now Jeremiah 6:16 says, "Thus says the Lord, stand at the crossroads and look and ask for the ancient paths, where the good way lies, and walk in it, and find rest for your soul." And that's what we've got to do. We've got to stand in these times when mass worship of things like Stonehenge are taking place, and Wiccans will be out this evening celebrating the longest day, and there will be a lot going on. We need to stand at the crossroads of all creation God has put us in today and look for the ancient paths, which is Sabbath and the feasts, and walk in those things, and we will, as a result, find rest for our souls. So Shabbat Shalom, Mike Fryer.